KTN News. Get the whole story.
After more than 60 years of service as a teacher, a doctor, and a public health professional, Professor Miriam Were has had many accolades, many awards, many recognitions, the latest of them being the Nobel Peace Prize nominations. My name is Dr. Mercy Korir, and on this episode of Doctor's Diary, the Weres welcome us to their home as we discuss 60 years of working in the health sector.
I only worked in a hospital when I was an intern, as a medical intern. But most of my life, I have worked outside the hospital, working on promoting health and preventing disease. So I just want to say it's a very worthwhile thing. And I thank God that this nomination means that it was important. So we need to pay attention to it.
This was Professor Miriam Hamadi Were's remark upon her learning that the American Friends Service Committee and the Quaker Peace and Social Witness nominated her for consideration for the Nobel Peace Prize this year, 2022. This, she says, is an acknowledgement of the issues she has spent her life working on.
When I was in Standard 8, we had only one high school for Protestant girls. That was Alliance Girls. And so as we were doing Standard 8, we were all running and hoping and praying to go to Alliance. But in 1956, that is when I did my CAPE. When 1957 came, I got a letter, you have done very well, you're going to high school. So of course I began preparing for Alliance. Then the second letter came and it said, oh, you're not going to Alliance, you're going to another school. And I started to cry. And then we were told that the girls from the Nyanza area, that is most of Western Kenya, had done very well. And rather than just pick 3 girls to Alliance, they decided to establish a new high school called Butere Girls High School. And so that's how I ended up in Butere Girls High School in 1957. Because Butere Girls High School was a primary high school, like 5 to 8. So they didn't have laboratories. So as Butere Girls High School in my time, the only science we had was biology, not chemistry, not physics. And I had always wanted to be a health professional, but it seemed like my road was closed.
Born in 1940, Professor Were's dream was to be a doctor, but that dream got derailed. She had settled for life as a chemistry and biology teacher soon after she came back to Kenya from the US, where she had done her first degree in natural sciences.
When I came to the Ministry of Education, they said, oh, we can't take you to a medical school. We want science teachers.
Her journey to America had begun in high school.
I'm a member of the Friends Church. Whenever we were at youth camps, there was a nurse who always wanted to treat children who have got wounds on their legs. You know, in those days we walked barefoot, so there were always wounds on our legs. And she would say, I want to treat these children with the wounds on their legs. Who'll clean the wounds before, who'll wash the legs before and I always wash the legs. And it was just normal because I have younger sisters and brothers. But what I didn't realize that the missionaries were taking note of this. So when I came to the end of my high school, and the nurse asked me when I was in my last year, the nurse that used to do this, would you like to be a health professional? I said I would have liked to, but I don't have any science, so I probably won't be. And to make a long story short, the missionaries organized for me to go to have my first degree in the US, what they call the liberal arts college. In a liberal arts college, you can actually start on any topic from scratch.
In America, at William Penn College in Iowa, the then young, curious and ambitious Miriam would find herself at an unfamiliar territory as a young black woman.
I remember in my first chemistry class in high school, at the college, the teacher wanted to begin by revising. And so he wrote H2O on the blackboard. And I put up my hand. I said, why do you put 2 on H and O has nothing? Then you say CO2. You put CO has nothing and now 2 is on O. Why? And the whole class turned and looked, whoa. It so happened that I was also the first African student in that college. So being an African and ignorant was a bad combination in those days. But the teacher told me, okay, I'll discuss that with you later. And then later on, he went to check on my performance at school certificate and said, you've done very well, but I see there is no chemistry, there's no physics. So what he did was to give me high school textbooks and said, you read the topics, and then before you come to school, to class, you look at the topic we are going to cover because he's given us the topics he'll be covering, and you come to class. So actually, I did high school chemistry by myself. What I found is that chemistry was fantastic for me. I liked it. And so I had no problem with that. Physics was more difficult, but I struggled with it. So I graduated with a science degree.
She was then admitted to medical school in Indiana University, but her desire was to come back home to Kenya.
But I had not been home. And one of my problems of going to America, when the missionary told me to go to America, I said no, because my mother died when I was in high school. And I was afraid my father might die when I was away. So when I finished 4 years and now they are telling me to go to medical school for 5 years, I was worried my father might die. Then they told me, oh, we will take you to Kenya first. And then something happened. I said, no, you're not going to go to Kenya. You just go to medical school. I couldn't, so I decided to come home, hoping that the Ministry of Education of Kenya would send me to Makerere, where there was a medical school.
Back in Kenya, as a high school teacher in Isili Secondary School, Professor Wera was then married with 2 children at the time, and life seemed to be unfolding comfortably for the then young couple.
When she wanted to join the university, she came home and said, nimeona mambo huko. What do you think? I would like to go to do medicine. What do you think? I said, if that was your original plan, and if that was your original plan, we have no problem. We shall work together to see how we live. And we did.
It is her experiences as a high school teacher that really reignited her desire to be a doctor.
In those days, schools were according to race. Muzungu schools, Asian schools, African schools. So Isli was just under Africanization, was being Africanized or integrated. And I found such sick children there. Sick children. What shocked me is that when I took some of these sick children to the medical clinics in Nairobi, I found most of the doctors nearly were medical women who were Asian medical women. And one day I took an Asian woman, a student who was having a cold, and a very sick African student. The medical doctor examined the Asian student, but not the African student. She just prescribed aspirin. And I saw this several times. Then I went home and I told him, where are we going to go? And I picked up admission forms because the University of Nairobi had just opened a medical school. So that's how I ended up. I ended up because we didn't have, it was very difficult for Africans to access health.
In her first year, she had the best score in the university as a married woman. When everybody was calling her, look at this old woman, Kurani. She had the best score.
And I don't want it to look like I was developing at his expense. He is a very qualified man. He had one of the first masters in agriculture in this country. And the university wanted him to stay to do the PhD. But the country said, no, you have to come back. The country needs you now. And then we shall release you to go back. But they never released him. So it's not like we were supporting each other.
A few minutes of meeting and spending time with the Weres, it is obvious that the story and the success of Professor Miriam Were, the mother of 5 and grandmother to many, would not be if her husband had not been supportive.
I was very lucky that this Mzee should sit here with me, because I was very lucky that he approved that I go to medical school when I was a wife and a mother. I came home, I said, you know, now that there's a medical school, I can't just go on like this. What's happening in the villages of Kenya? By this time I was a mother, so I knew how difficult it is when your child gets sick in the night. At least we had a car. We could drive to the hospital. What about my dear sister who didn't even have a car? And he said, okay, if you want to go to medical school, I cannot stop you. I would be lucky. Let's see if we can do it. And that's what he did. Many of his friends told him not to support me to medical school. When I had joined medical school, many of his friends told me, yeah, you are a very foolish man. The boys' schools, the boys at the university are going to steal your wife.
Mr. Humphreys Were back then was under immense pressure and ridicule from fellow men who did not understand how he allowed his wife to go on and pursue medicine. Many predicted doom for the union.
And one of them came, and he was a professor. He came to me and said, you are Mjinga. How can you leave your wife she's going to the university to study? I told him, my friend, mind your home, and I'll mind my home. You are not the one dictating my home, and you did not help me to choose her. I chose her, and therefore, mind your home. He never talked to me again. He has been my friend. He's still alive, but he never talked to me again. We meet and laugh over it. And I know that there was another one who was a doctor, and she went to the hospital for delivery. And all he told her was, and you think you are going to become a doctor with a pregnancy? And we just said, look, this is a pregnancy. We have come to you as an expert. When that time comes, it will be a different thing. And for sure, when it came, it was a different thing. Even when she went for studies, people told me, but you are just leaving your wife to run around. I told them, look, please concentrate on your own families. Leave my family alone. And most of them left my family alone. And we have been now married 56 years. Some of them look at us and say, these are the people that were saying they will separate because of going up and down in various places. But God still keeps us together.
But what they didn't know is that the others hadn't stolen me for 10 years. I had made up my mind that I had made a very special person. So he still is special.
The family had to adjust in many ways, and more so financially, to accommodate her as she pursued her dream of being a doctor.
I asked the dean of the medical school that I would like to be a day student, because in those days, day students were not there. And the way I had organized my life was that when I came home as a teacher, I looked after my children to make sure they are fed and they are bathed and so on. Then from about 8:30, 9, I apply myself to my studies until I finish my studies or my schemes of teaching and so on. So I used the same approach for medical school. And maybe because I had a degree before, but I didn't find medical school particularly hard. Everyone had told me, oh, you're going to have a very difficult time. It wasn't harder than the other subjects I had done. Or maybe it was just the interest. And I really enjoyed being in medical school.
The couple attributes their success to a lifelong friendship that began when they were in high school.
Today, a young man and a young girl meet each other for 3 months. Then they say, we are in such deep love, we are going to get married. And within those 3 months, the 6 months, they are killing each other. They are knocking each other because they don't understand each other. They have not understood each other. Here she was in high school, and I was in high school, and we grew up together. We went through many channels, some which we think God was only able to connect us. I would like to give you one small example. To take a little longer, but here she was going to the States in 1961, and I was in Ethiopia. In Ethiopia, I left to go for holiday, work in Tanganyika, in a place called Kongwa. When I was there, something urged me, get back home. And Tanganyika government was saying, we have now promoted you to be the general manager of this farm, which was 40 miles by 40 miles with 40,000 head of cattle. I was the manager. And I was going to be the manager when independence of Tanganyika came. But I told them I'm going back home. They say, but we have just promoted you and we have given you more salary. I said, I don't care, I'm not interested in your salary, I'm going home. And I just tied up my boots, came to Nairobi with what we used to call OTC, Overseas Touring Company, from Dodoma. When I reached Nairobi in the morning, I decided, let me go for a stroll in town. I went for a stroll in town. I was walking around Ambassador Hotel there. And someone taps on my back like that. And I look around, I say, but... And there she was. No expectation, no arguing, telling each other, I'm coming. And that same night, she was going to the States. She didn't even know where to go in Nairobi to get her tickets. So I told her, do you have any money? She said, no. I said, let me give you a cup of tea. And let me take you now where the tickets are. She got the ticket and so on. To me, I look at it, that was God's working.
Knowing and understanding each other, they say, is the foundation of a successful life as a couple, socially, academically, or in one's career.
It is important to support each other so as to uplift each other. And that's why today, most homes of wazees are breaking down. Because wazees don't consult with their wives and their children. They don't even want their children to know what they have. They don't even want their wives to know what they have. What they have belongs to them.
After graduating from medical school in 1973, Professor Wera went on to do her internship at the Kenyatta National Hospital, but due to her passion and desire to work with communities, she was soon employed at the University of Nairobi as a lecturer at the then Department of Community Health.
I felt like my teacher training hadn't been wasted. What shocked me was the fact that teachers in universities are untrained teachers. They teach with books in their faces. They are reading notes from big books and teaching students. If you do that in a teacher training college, you would not pass as a teacher. So I enjoyed teaching. And I taught in medical school until I was invited to join the UN.
She continued to teach at the university for 11 more years before joining the UN in Ethiopia, first in UNICEF as the Chief of Health and Nutrition, then WHO as the Ethiopia country representative, and finally at UNFPA as Director for the regional program covering East, Central and Anglophone West Africa, before retiring in 2000 at the age of 60.
UNICEF, actually, they wanted me to go in 83, I told them, I'm committed, I cannot leave the country. And some of my colleagues said, you are a very stupid woman. How can you keep up a UN job, UN salary? How can you refuse to go and get stuck here? I said, we must have the Master Public Health Program. Fortunately, they came back after that. The executive director of UNICEF New York had actually been monitoring And the moment our student graduated, he came and talked to me and said, now your students have graduated, can you please go to Ethiopia and work with them? They wanted someone who could promote the community approach in Ethiopia so that they can deal with family in terms of the famine, because the famine and the diarrhea were killing children and even adults. It was a big crisis for the country.
One of her proudest achievements at the university was laying the foundations and finally establishing the School of Public Health.
By the time I joined, the Department of Obs and Gynae had M.Med, Obs and Gynae, M.Med Pediatrics, M.Med Master of Medicine in Surgery. They all had Master of Medicine in Surgery. But there was no Masters in Community Health. So I made up my mind that I will establish the Master of Public Health program, which was a big dream, because first of all, I had to get the Master of Public Health myself, which got opened the doors, and I did it in Hopkins, and I did the Doctor of Public Health also. And after this, when I finished the Doctor of Public Health, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi appointed me in charge of the postgraduate programs in the department, which were none. And the problem was that we couldn't start the Master of Public Health program because we didn't have teachers. And we couldn't have teachers because we didn't have the Master of Public Health program. So it was a vicious circle, which I decided to break. And I broke it by two approaches. I talked to my colleagues in the Ministry of Health, who had a Master of Public Health, who were the administrators, and persuaded them to be part-time teachers with us in the department at a small pay, but very small. Fortunately, they were very happy to do it. And secondly, I also worked with universities, like the University of Liverpool, the University of London, and asked them to second teachers to us. And I also asked WHO, because WHO had helped to establish the Department of Public Health. And I said, just give us these teachers for 3 years. And they did. So then in 1983, we mounted the first Master of Public Health.
In 2005, she was presented the award of Elder of the Order of the Burning Spear, EBS, by former President Mwai Kibaki for distinguished service rendered to the nation. She continues to be involved in a number of boards, committees, councils, and other professional associations. The Nobel Peace Prize will be one of her many recognitions.
When I did a national pilot project for community-based healthcare, on which the Ministry of Health based their community health strategy department, the community gave me bananas. They organized an organization to sing and dance and give me a banana bunch. I was very moved. They said, thank you for coming to us to show us that we can improve our health. Now, that was very moving for me. Then after that, I began getting awards. Dodi can tell you about my son there. They have been all wonderful. But maybe the one that made was like the Queen Elizabeth II award. Just because Queen Elizabeth, a public health for the Commonwealth. I got the Public Health Award for Commonwealth. It was very impressive. That was in 2007. And then in 2008, Japan announced a continental prize. There was a continental prize, and all Africa had to nominate people. And I was nominated by Kenyans, and I was nominated by non-Kenyans. So the fact that I was able I was the winner of the Hideo Noguchi Africa Prize was a very moving experience from a continental perspective.
If awarded, Professor Were will be the second Kenyan after the late Professor Wangari Maathai to walk the footsteps of other great men and women, including the late Nelson Mandela, who have gotten the coveted Global Award announced every 10th of December.
Most health professionals who get nominated for things like that are people who are working in hospitals or institutions. And what it means to me is that it has been recognized that working with people to empower them, to give them information, to change their lives is also important. And I have found that That is the fastest way to change the disease burden and help people to become. And the community approach that I used is not only promoting health, it's also promoting community cohesion, peace, and it's also promoting economic well-being, because people, okay, we are hungry, so how do you get healthy? So you work with communities on how to make community gardens, on how to produce food. So I found that health and peace are the foundation of development, really. And I think that if I'm given a chance to preach that message to Africa, and Africa can understand can accept the message of an old lady, we can change this continent. I have no doubt about that. Peace and health together establish the basis for economic development.
Professor Miriam Were has been an eminent woman, a trailblazer, having made changes to the public health as we know it in Kenya today. And on this International Women's Day, we acknowledge and appreciate 60 years of an illustrious and industrious career of a phenomenal woman. Dr. Masi Korir for KTN News.